Manmofo'na, a Chamorro term meaning those who came first. Chamorros, according to Pigafetta, were the people here when Spain's slow seafaring vessels were first rescued by the great warriors of the soon-to-be-named Marianas Islands, an archipelago that has been inhabited for 4,000 years. Hafade, Guao Sirafin Pico. I'm a Chamorro visual artist from the island of Guam. For over a decade, I have been researching what the life of the ancient Chamorro was like. Such research has led me to northern Marianas, as well as on Guam. I have met some very knowledgeable people over the years. My research now brings me to the Latte. Through history, archaeology, and culture, we will find the answers to who built the Latte, what for, and why did they abandon it. The Latte stone. It's become a symbol of both Guam and its native Chamorro people. Its influence can be seen throughout the island, influencing the arts, crafts, and even inspiring architecture. It's seen on t-shirts, stickers, and tattoos. But what is it? How did the ancient Chamorros make it? Why did they make it, and what was it used for? For generations, the native inhabitants of the Marianas, especially Guam, have left this archipelago for numerous reasons. From opportunity to drastic change, to fulfillment of curiosity. But why would you leave these great megaliths? Why would they leave their home? So what is the Latte stone? The Latte stone is a stone structure found only in the Marianas Islands. It's made of two parts, the pillar, called the haligi, and the capstone, which is called the tasa in Chamorro. The pillars, or haligi, have a rectangular shape that usually comes to a bit of a taper at its top. The capstone, or tasa, is a cup-like or hemispherical shaped rock that sits on top of the pillar, or haligi. Latte are always found in sets. They are arranged in parallel rows of 3, 4, 5, or even 14 pairs. The rows of Latte form a rectangular shape. The average size is around 4 to 6 feet in height, but the smallest ones found were about 1 foot off the ground. The largest ones found are in Tinian, or what is called the House of Taga. They reach an incredible 14 feet in height. But why did the Chamorros make them? Although they most likely had a more spiritual purpose. According to archaeological and historical data, they were used as pillars for Chamorro houses before the Spanish era. In fact, archaeological and historical data supports this. Early European explorers in the 1500s and 1600s described traditional Chamorro houses as being built upon stone pillars. According to Miguel Lopez de Legazpi's expedition in 1565, the houses are high, well kept and well made. They stand the height of a man off the ground, atop large stone pillars upon which they lay. The Spanish Franciscan priest Fray Juan Pobre de Zamora also wrote about the Latte houses. These are the best native houses I've ever seen because they are all built on stone pillars, which the others do not have. Belgian Jesuit Father Peter Cummins wrote, "They keep their belongings in another house built high upon pillar-like stones. Here are found all their riches, such as some tortoise shell, for they value them more than gold, and in some earthen pots a single-edge or double-edged axe, discolored glass beads, and some castanets." So we know the Latte stones were in the very least used as pillars for houses. But how were they made? To help us understand how and why they were made, we took a look at how they were quarried. We met with a man who has studied numerous archaeological sites throughout the Marianas for more than 30 years. As the former historic preservation officer of the island of Guam, Vic Apro did extensive studies in the quarries of these Latte stones. He is the author of the book Latte Quarries of the Marianas. What type of materials would Latte stones be made of in the Marianas?
You know, they come in different type of rocks. The hardest one is what they call basalt. It's a volcanic rock that's very, very hard, and you know, and you find that that kind of lucky stone very rarely because it's very hard to make. It's a very dense rock. It's basalt rock, and then there's the facies, which is softer, and there's sandstone. That's a lot softer rock, very easy to make. Then the one in Rota is very soft limestone. That's why, you know, I mean, they could never get them up, you know, because it's so heavy and so it breaks real easy, you know. But the hardest one is basalt rock, volcanic rock, very tough.
How were our ancestors able to quarry or carve out such hard rocks to make latte? One theory is that fire was used to burn the rocks and weaken them so that they could be pulled or dug out easier. But Vic April doesn't believe this is how it was done.
There is no evidence right now. I mean, maybe there was, but there is no evidence right now to suggest that they used fire, charcoal, or you know, or evidence of fire activities. Not even Rota. And I mean, you know, Urunao, you cannot use fire at Urunao because the water comes every 1 hour or so. You know, how can so?
April says the evidence suggests that the latte stones were meticulously dug out using traditional stone tools like the adze.
Just a lot of hard work, a lot of teamwork, and a lot of time.
However, the exact way they were quarried and dug out remains a mystery, but what is known is that they are unique.
What relationship do the latte stones in the Marianas have with any other island in the region? You know, I mean, Micronesia or even farther.
I'm telling you, there is nothing like this anywhere else, really. Nowhere else we can find. This is a unique thing to the Marianas.
So we can say with much certainty that latte were used as pillars for Chamorro houses. But when did Chamorro start making them and why? The archaeological record based on radiocarbon dating suggests the latte stones were first made in 800 or 900 AD and stopped being used sometime after the Spanish arrived on Guam in the late 1600s to early 1700s. Some archaeologists believe that they stopped being used after Spaniards burned latte houses to the ground during the Spanish Chamorro Wars. But why the Chamorros started making them has remained a bit of a mystery. Why did the ancestors decide to start creating these stone structures? Who invented them? Where did they get the idea? We met with Dr. Mike Carson, an archaeologist who has worked on sites throughout the Marianas. He and his colleagues, Dr. Hiro Kurashina, Dr. John Peterson, and others worked on the journal Micronesias that started in Ilati, a story of the Latte. In this journal, the authors present a bold and controversial theory about the origin of the Latte.
Okay, there's multiple theories. I'll start with one basic idea, which is what makes the latte unique in the first place is they're made of stone with the pillar and the capital on top. And you just don't see that in many other places, well, nowhere in Micronesia.
But Carson explains that he and his colleagues theorized that the latte could be related to structures found in parts of Southeast Asia.
In many other places, we see things that look like latte with the pillar and the capital, but made of wood. And mostly these are known in the Philippines and in Indonesia. There's also some places in Okinawa in Japan where you see something similar made of wood.
In the Ifugao province of the Philippines, houses sit on wooden pillars called haligi, the same word that Chamorros use for latte pillars. These haligi have circular wooden discs.
And it's thought that the wooden disc on top is a rat guard to prevent rats from climbing up.
However, unlike the latte, the disc and pillar are one piece. But the Philippines isn't the only place in Southeast Asia with structures that are similar to latte. In Indonesia, on the island of Sulawesi, in an area called Sumba, there are stone monoliths that look similar to the haligi or pillar of the latte, and the name is similar also. They're called Ranti stones.
Indonesia, there's a linguistic connection with some of the words about latte. There's the Ranti stones, for example, in parts of Indonesia, which today are not used for supporting houses. They're just sort of revered as ancient things in the forest, or sometimes associated with burial places. Dr. Hiro Kuroshina has looked into this exact topic. He went to Indonesia, found the places and the stones, and tried to compare those with the latte we have in the Marianas. And what he found was, in his mind, conclusive enough that there may be a connection, is what he's able to say. He wasn't able to say, yes, this definitely is the source. He was able to say, this is worth looking a little closer. And I tend to agree with that.
Ranti stones are stone pillars used in burial ceremonies by the Tanah Toraja people of Indonesia. They are said to contain the spirit of the deceased. The Chamorro latte is also often associated with the burial site.
Mostly it varies on the kind of soil that you have. Some places simply don't have soil buildup where people would be buried. Others, in beach settings with nice, deep sand and soil, you often find people buried on the front, what we call the front side of the house, which would be the front facing the ocean. And the number varies anywhere from 1 or 2 to possibly 8 or 10 at a single latte set.
And then in West Sumba, Indonesia, there are stone megaliths called rati stones, and they too are used as tombstones in front of traditional houses. In Sumba, ancestral houses are called uma, which is close to the Chamorro word for guma. They are similar to latte, but unlike latte, they have flat capstones that sit on multiple pillars, almost like a table. One of the most controversial pieces of evidence for an Indonesian origin of the latte stones comes from the Borobudur Temple in Java. The temple was built in the 8th and 9th centuries. It contains thousands of carvings on its walls, and one of those carvings contained what looks like a house on top of what look like latte stones. There are people under the house. And then further along to the right of the carving, there appears to be an outrigger canoe. Could this be depicting an ancient voyage? There's no way to tell, but it does spark interest. The connections to Southeast Asia, and particularly Indonesia, are not only supported by linguistic and cultural similarities, but now DNA evidence is supporting this theory. Dr. Miguel Villar has just completed a study of Chamorro DNA. He not only concludes that Chamorros came from Indonesia, but that they came in 2 separate migrations. And the second migration came at about the time the latte stones were being made on Guam. So there is a lot of evidence that the idea for latte stones may have come from Southeast Asia. But the fact still remains that they are unique, and after the break, we will find out what's so unique about the Chamorro latte stones. The latte stone. New evidence suggests that it could have come from an ancient secondary migration of people from Indonesia. But this is still just a theory.
There's many other ideas. Perhaps the latte stones were invented locally. Why do you need an outside population to tell the ancient Chamorros how to make latte stones? Why could they not have thought about it by themselves? And practically speaking, of course, people could have thought of this themselves. Maybe first starting with other materials, trees and wood, and then moving to the quarried stones. We don't really know exactly. There's some theories that the word for Latte is related to, make a change from one form to another form of the house. There's so many different ideas.
What is known is that the Latte are unique. We spoke with William Hernandez of the Department of Historic Preservation. Hernandez has worked on numerous Latte sites. He believes that the Latte stones were an ingenious feat of architectural accomplishment.
This contribution of the Chamorro civilization to architecture, I think, should be honored and respected because never a civilization can, on their own, right, design structures like this in a typhoon belt, earthquake belt, and for a long time. In fact, they were building it for 1,700 years.
The fact that Guam lies in a typhoon belt and in a region prone to earthquakes gives us a clue as to why the Latte may have been constructed. Hernandez and his longtime colleague, Al Lizama, has a theory that the Latte stone was developed to resist typhoons and earthquakes because the capstone is not stuck to the pillar, but perfectly balanced, creating a sort of flexible ball joint.
So one night we were together and they go, hey, why don't we check that theory we have, that the reason why Chamorros wanted this floating is because it's a pivot that during a strong earthquake, there's no way that structure is going to fall. It's an anti-earthquake design.
Hernandez says that he and Al Lizama built a model house and shook it as hard as they could, and it remained intact. Architect Andrew Laguagna was involved in Dr. Carson and Kirshina's paper on the Latte stone. He was asked to examine the structure from an architectural perspective. He designed a 3D model of the Latte together with John Uggan. Laguagna believes that the Latte was developed to withstand Mother Nature.
This sort of idea of something that sat on this thing that could probably withstand the rocking motion of a seismic activity. Because if you notice that the recess underneath the capstone is more sort of cone shape, not really cone shape, but dome shape, so that it sat on top of it, and it had this opportunity to roll in a seismic condition, design it so that it can do this kind of like a ball joint. You got the Latte, the capstone, right? And then on top of it, the capstone on top of it, and you see that dome-shaped recess underneath of it that sort of fits up, on top of the column structure to have this sort of ability to roll without probably falling off in an earthquake situation. So that's what my theory is behind that. That it can, like a joint, almost like a joint. I'm sure, in major typhoons, if it was high tide, you'd get, surges that would bring water all the way in. So that's probably one of the reasons why it got lifted up off the ground.
The 3D model that Laguagna and Uggan made was actually based off the design found on the Borobudur carving. But he believes the Indonesians came here, saw the Latte stones, and then carved it into their temple.
My personal belief is, I think those guys came here, and they show that boat off to the side of it, in that panel. And I think they came here. And that was their sort of, I call them Kodak photo shot, Kodak moment of what they saw here. And the sketches, their sort of documentation, if you will, of what they saw here is pretty accurate. You look at all the detail, my theory is that's what they saw when they came to Guam. And I think that, like I said, there's no place you see that kind of structure in Asia. Some variation of, but not exactly like that.
While our ancestors stopped using Latte stones centuries ago, there are modern-day Chamorros who are trying to revive this ancient building tradition. Welu, as his friends call him, is a traditional hut builder from the island of Rota, or Luta.
Wow, I don't want to exaggerate this, but Yeah, I've built at least close to 100 houses already. The biggest house that I've built is 55 feet long. So that's a big house.
Recently, he's experimented with building Latte, or latte houses, on Guam at the Linatlat Cultural Park in Tumon, and in other places. Guelo learned traditional hut building as a kid in Rota.
During our elementary and middle school, you know, masters from the villages will come to the school and teach the kids how to actually build a hut.
Guelo says that even with modern tools, one Latte or latte house took him and his crew over a month to complete. It's hard work, and he says it's no wonder why youth these days aren't interested in learning how to build traditional huts.
Why build a hut when there's canopy, right? You know, a lot of people, and they just put that in their mind, and they put our culture in the site, which is they thought it's not very important, but this is something that we can be proud of, and we have to be show off, and we have to be, you know, happy when who we are, because we're badass, you know. Yeah, we're one of a kind. Yeah.
Right?
The haligi of northern Philippines, Ifugao. The ranti stones of Sulawesi. The rati stones of Sumba, both Indonesia. All very similar, but nothing as unique as the latte stones of the Northern Marianas and Guam. Wow, si Raf and Pinko. Thank you for watching.